Kia ora koutou, ko Nick Morrison ho. Welcome everyone, my name's Nick Morrison. I'm the founding director of GoWell Consulting. We are a full service sustainability consultancy and we work with businesses to help them understand what impacts we're currently having on the planet and on people as a whole, as an economy and as individual businesses, and then we help them decide on what role they want to play in moving our economy forward to one that operates in harmony with our natural world and one that is more equitable and fair for everyone. Digital sustainability is a big part of that. Our world is becoming more and more digitized, and so we really wanted to go a bit deeper on the topic of digital and the impacts that our decisions around the use of IT equipment, computers and phones and AI and so on are having on our world, and what role they have to play in the future economy. So we've partnered with Jean-Philippe Ehret, who is on this call with me, who is a digital sustainability expert at Resilio, and he's going to introduce himself in a moment and tell you a bit more about himself. But that is sort of the kaupapa for today, and what we really wanted to do was just dive deep into Jean-Philippe's knowledge around the impacts of the digital world, I guess. So quick intro there, and the agenda, just a housekeeping one to bring your attention to. We will send the slides out after the presentation, so feel free to take notes, but we will send those out to all of those who are on the call. And please feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions, and we'll do the questions at the end. We'll have time at the end for questions. Brilliant. Next slide, please. I've sort of talked about GoWell already. This is just a slide that covers off sort of what we do, and also some of the impact that we've had over the last year or so. And there's more of that on our website that you can have a look at. Next slide. So I just wanted to frame things up a little bit. Before I pass on to Jean-Philippe to go deep into the digital side, we just sort of wanted to pull back a bit in that sort of helicopter view of the whole of sort of sustainability and the whole of kind of our considerations in terms of what impact we're having on the planet. So what we've got here on this slide is what's called the planetary boundaries. It's a pretty famous framework within the sustainability circles, and what it's done is split our impact on the environment into 9 critical areas. So this is a piece of work that was developed by some very impressive scientists, and you can see it's developed over the years, or they continue to measure the impact we're having on the planet across these 9 environmental boundaries over the years. And in green is we're in what they call the safe operating space, so the planet can handle what we're doing to it. Whereas when we go out of the green into those red and orange areas, this is what's called the area of uncertainty. For example, top right, I'm not sure how well you can see it on your screen, but let's say it's 1 o'clock on 2023. That's novel entities. So that talks about plastics and chemicals, and that's well past the safe operating space, and that shouldn't surprise anyone on this call, considering how much plastic we know is in our environment and in our food chain and us. So we've got a lot to do, right? We've got a lot to do to try and remediate these problems and develop a economic system that's not unsustainable, that's not causing us to overshoot these natural boundaries. Next slide, please, Jean-Philippe. We always share this slide with our clients who we work with. It's sort of pretty fundamental to understand, right, that physics and the laws of the universe and how the world works cannot be changed, right? But our economic policies and business models can be, right? We can't change the force of gravity, the speed of light, the fact that carbon dioxide traps heat in our atmosphere. That's just how the world works. But we can change how we run our businesses. We can change what our tax policies are. We can change what rules we have around pollution and so forth. So we really need to be focusing on just one part of this equation. Next slide, please. We talk a lot about the circular economy at Go Well Consulting. It's a great way to kind of think about the future. Basically, everything in our natural world grows, dies, and decays. Okay, it is this circle of life. It is a water cycle. Water evaporates into the atmosphere, condenses, falls back down as rain. It's a carbon cycle. It's even a rock cycle, albeit that happens over millions of years. So if we're going to sustain life on this planet, we have to live in harmony with those systems, and therefore our economic system has to become circular. So it's all pretty logical. And when we talk about the circular economy, it's pretty easy for most people to capture that and visualize that. There's three key principles of a circular economy. One, design out waste and pollution. That includes designing out polluting our atmosphere with greenhouse gases. Two, keeping products and materials in use. So yes, recycling, but reusing, repairing, redesigning, and also we work with businesses to help them think about the business models as well. So businesses that will be developing take-back programs or repair programs or rental programs rather than just selling products. And lastly, that third principle is really important to understand. We've got more to do than just sustain our world. We actually have to repair and regenerate our planet. It's so sick and so damaged. We've actually got a job to do to heal it, I guess. So not just stop putting plastics in the ocean, but get plastics out. Not just stop putting greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, but actually bring them down. Not just stop cutting down trees, but plant back more. So it's a bigger challenge than a lot of people realize, but we at Go Well Consulting are big on facing up to the challenges and then working through trying to solve them from there. So yeah, thanks. Next slide. Just sort of wanted to frame that up a bit as the current problems that we're facing very quickly, and then the future that's out there, and really it is for us this circular economy. This slide just talks briefly to some of the impacts that we know the digital world is having on our natural world. You can see there Microsoft's scope 3 emissions rose by 30%, and they've said that was because of their massive increase in data centers that they are building. You can see their energy from the International Energy Agency, the amount of electricity that one data center uses today, around about 100,000 households. And Jean-Philippe's got some more stats and information on that. Next slide, please. We know also waste, huge amount of waste is created, often referred to as e-waste or electronic waste. It's causing huge problems, and mostly we don't see it because it gets sent over to developing countries where they don't have the environmental or employment laws like we do here, and so a lot of it just gets dumped and causes huge issues there. And it's hugely valuable resources that we're having to keep digging out of the ground and grinding out of the ground and cutting down trees to get to these rare earth metals, etc. At the same time, we're dumping them at the other end, right? So that's the antithesis of that sort of circular economy that I talked about. Next slide, please, Jean-Philippe. And of course, sustainability is not just about the environment, it's also about impacts on people. And there's an estimated 50 million people currently living in modern slavery conditions, which is pretty confronting. And you can see there, according to the Global Slavery Index, electronics is the #1 at-risk item or industry for slavery, for modern slavery across the G20 countries. Cool. So yeah, just wanted to frame up a little bit before I pass on to Jean-Philippe, who's going to go a whole lot deeper into this stuff. But one final thought I just wanted to share when we're thinking about the digital world and our current sort of environmental and social challenges. This is a really great quote that I like from a guy called Paul Hawken that's on the next slide, who's a well-known author and advocate, I guess, for a sustainable world and a sustainable future. And he said, "We have created an astonishing moment of truth. The climate crisis is not a science problem. It is a human problem. The ultimate power to change the world does not reside in technologies. It relies on reverence, respect, and compassion for ourselves, for all people, and for all life." Cool. So that's just me sort of setting the scene a little bit and helping yeah, explain, I guess, the connection between Go Well and Resilio. And now I'd like to pass the microphone over to Jean-Philippe, who's going to go way deeper and share some really fantastic knowledge that he's got around digital sustainability. Over to you, Jean-Philippe.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for that insightful introduction. I was actually blown away by the numbers on modern slavery, truly eye-opening. And thank you for having me today. It's a real pleasure to share a few thoughts on digital sustainability, which is a topic that until recently hasn't received much attention. Nick already presented some compelling numbers, and I will be adding many more throughout the rest of the webinar. But science evolves constantly, and these numbers can change. In fact, they have already shifted significantly over the past 2 or 3 years. So beyond the numbers, I hope I can help make these numbers feel a little less overwhelming and a lot more actionable. Kiora, let me quickly introduce myself. I've been working in the software industry for over 25 years, doing just about every job you can think of. I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer at an Oakland-based startup operating in the innovation space. And to say the least, I'm immersed in tech. But before IT, my background was in renewable energy. And I also worked for some time as a researcher in a field called green information technology. I'm passionate about digital sustainability, and a few years ago, I founded a company called Better Bytes. So Better Bytes originated here in New Zealand, but was recently acquired by Resilio, which is a European leader in that space, based in Switzerland. So Resilio provides digital sustainability services to many large corporates in Western Europe, including several banks and manufacturing giants like Airbus. But they are best known for their work in the public sector, helping governments and institutions develop regulation at both national and European levels. So they are really at the forefront of what is likely to be coming our way in the next few years. So indeed, in Europe, digital sustainability is quite a thriving domain, driven by ambitious regulation. But the topic isn't really a hot one in most parts of the world. So let me remind you a few numbers that show why this issue is so important to tackle. So let's start with something that is on everyone's lips, climate change. So I born in the 70s. At the time, we only had a few computers here and there, and the carbon footprint were close to zero. Today, depending on the study, the digital industry accounts for somewhere between 4 to 6% of global emissions. So that's between about twice the emissions of air traffic and the emissions of all individual cars worldwide. And because we are digitizing all sectors of our economy, the trend is going up. By 2040, emissions from digital technology could account for 14%, which is a symbolic number for us in New Zealand because that's the share of emissions from the agricultural sector. On an individual scale, if we take 2 tons as our personal carbon budget, digital activities already account for about 50% of that budget when we include both our personal and our professional use. And that leaves just 50% for everything else, right? So food, transport, heating, and so on. Now, before we go anything by digital, we usually identify 3 tiers. First is the user equipment. These are the connected devices you are very familiar with, like your laptop or your smartphone. On the other end, we have the data centers, which store and supply the information. And in between, there is the network infrastructure that connects both worlds. And what we know is that until last year, emissions were mainly concentrated on the end user devices. So smartphone, laptops, but also increasingly what we call Internet of Things devices, things like connected TVs, washing machines, and cars. On average, each person has about 10 to 15 of these devices, and the number keeps growing. And interestingly, carbon emissions come mainly from upstream processes. The embodied carbon of our digital equipment is mostly generated during the mining and refining of raw materials, which are very energy-consuming processes. So just a side note here, this diagram is very interesting. We don't have time to study this diagram in details, but the data also show a very concerning impact of mining and refining on all environmental factors, especially soil and water pollution. Now, because most of the footprint is embodied, it is important to make our equipment last. Unfortunately, there are many headwinds. And if I take the smartphone as an example, the expected lifespan today is only 2 to 3 years at most, driven by two factors. And the first is what is called the technical obsolescence, things like unavailability of parts, equipment not designed to be fixed or upgraded, or devices unable to run the latest software. And the second is psychological obsolescence, notably due to sales or advertising that makes you feel you need to replace your device. And one study found that 88% of people replace their smartphone even when the old one is still working. All this leads to manufacturing 1.3 billion new smartphones every year. Now, Nick, you mentioned that GoWell Consulting is passionate about circularity, and I must say the world needs more agencies like yours, a lot more. The reality is that for now, only a very small fraction of equipment is recycled. A computer is made of almost the entire periodic table, more than 50 different metals. A large portion of these materials is not recycled at all. Recycling electronics is very difficult, and when possible, it is very energy intensive. Some well-mastered processes allow recycling of metals like gold or copper, but even these are imperfect and introduce impurities in the resulting material, making it unsuitable for reuse after 3 or 4 cycles. And this is what we call downcycling. Also, many elements are found in alloys. For example, there are 300 different types of aluminum alloys. It's like trying to extract chocolate out of a chocolate cake. It's not impossible, but each alloy requires a specific process, which makes recycling pathways often not economically viable. So the vast majority of e-waste, around 60%, is either dumped in unregulated landfills or illegally exported to communities who try to recover whatever they can from these e-waste, often in conditions that are harmful to both their health and the environment. Now, everything I just said about user equipment might be new to you, but I'm pretty sure you haven't missed the news about the environmental impact of data centers, and probably related to AI. We'll touch on that. There are over 77 million data centers worldwide, ranging from small to large facilities, generally operated in the Western world by Microsoft, Amazon, or Google. We call them hyperscale. To connect to these data centers, we need an infrastructure of 1.3 million kilometers of optic or copper cables. That's 4 times the distance to the moon, plus millions of antennas, relays, and even satellites. In New Zealand, as in many places around the world, there is a growing concern that data centers are consuming the green energy capacity we need to transition away from fossil fuels. We also know that AI is one of the reasons why big tech companies have postponed their carbon neutrality goals. A typical hyperscale data center consumed the equivalent of about 100,000 households. But what's coming is on a different scale. For example, the largest data center currently being designed would consume as much energy as a country like New Zealand. Now, we know about energy and carbon, and maybe one day we'll develop infinite energy capacity and machines that can remove carbon from the air. But after spending much than 10 years studying this field, I've come to the conclusion that the planet will soon remind us the physicality of the digital in other ways. Indeed, there are other concerns we should be aware of when it comes to the digital, and these personally concern me even more. So this data center here you see on the illustration is running ChatGPT. You can see plumes escaping from it. That's water. The data center is literally sweating. This happens because data centers require cooling. And what we call direct water cooling is the cheapest option. Basically, it involves drawing water from the aquifers, rivers, or lakes. The water absorbs the heat, evaporates, and eventually returns as rain, but not in the same location. So data centers are often built in regions with cheap energy, are also often dry areas with cheap labor. So many data centers are in effect taking water from local population. And I just want to make a quick point about water. Fresh water is scarce, but even more than you might think. I really like this image because it puts things into perspective. The water actually available for drinking and for data center cooling is representing by this teeny tiny bubble here next to the red arrow from aquifers, rivers, and lakes. Now, I know some of you may have heard about water cooling in relation to AI, and you may have seen this image before. And I can confirm you that a large language model equivalent to GPT-4 uses about 0.5 liters of fresh water for a simple conversation. And I can confirm that because my team peer-reviewed the only comprehensive study on the environmental footprint of a large language model. The news was just publicly released last Friday, so I'm really proud of it. So I couldn't resist sharing this information with you. And what about raw materials? Well, Nick touched on it, but let me tell you a bit more. All computing devices really rely on materials that are depleting very quickly. Humanity has only extracted a small fraction of these materials, but they came from high concentration deposits. The majority of the new deposits we're finding are much harder to extract. They require much more energy, which makes them often too expensive to harvest. And some materials like tin, lead, indium, and pretty much all rare earth elements are facing economic exhaustion within the next 10 to 20 years. Now, on the AI front, the peer-reviewed study on LLMs I just mentioned also come up with this interesting number. Every time we have a conversation with a large language model, we are consuming a 2-cent coins equivalent of raw materials. Now, not only will raw materials eventually run out, but as this McKinsey analysis points out, we also can't supply them fast enough, especially rare earth elements. This suggests we are heading towards a sharply rising cost for computing equipment in general, and possibly even geopolitical tensions over these increasingly scarce resources. And I'm sure you can think of some recent examples. Now, critical minerals power both the digital services and essential sectors like healthcare and renewable energy infrastructure. If we continue down this path, digital technology as a mass market product may only last for 1 or 2 generations in human history. We treat the digital as if it were an infinite commodity, but computing is a limited resource, just like fossil fuels. It's precious and valuable. My opinion is that we should see it as a duty to use it wisely. And here is the real issue. Digital is almost always seen as the solution for many of our problems. It's thanks to the digital technologies that we now have data measuring climate change. So it doesn't sound unreasonable when we hear that AI will solve climate change. The Digital for Good movement is an effort to quantify the benefits digital can bring to humanity versus the harm it can cause, to help us make better decisions. And when I say harm, I mean things like so-called green or efficient technologies being used, for example, to help oil companies find new fossil fuel reserves. This brings us to a key question. What is the purpose of the digital? This is often referred to IT for green. Now, what we are actually doing with the digital technology, that's a good question, isn't it? If you take a basic iPhone, it's about 1,000,000 times more powerful than the calculator that brought astronauts to the moon and back. And today, humanity has around 34 billion active computing devices. That gives us an astronomical amount of computing power. And if we look at the data flowing between data centers and end user device, roughly two-thirds of it is video streaming. So most of the massive computing power is being used for entertainment. And I'll let you guess what a good third of video streaming in pink is composed of. So generative AI is just an accelerator. It's just accelerating this trend. A significant number of queries to chatbot like ChatGPT could easily be avoided. Just as an illustration, about 13% of ChatGPT queries, let's say romantic queries. And what to say about short-lived funny images and now videos? Each of these 20-second videos you see popping up on social media consume as much energy as charging a MacBook for over 3 months. So this may all sound very doom and gloom, and what can we actually do? How do organizations address this concern? There is still a lot of awareness to build, but some organizations have started taking action. Most begin by measuring, usually starting with energy and carbon. And if you refer to the GSG protocol, most of the digital footprint is in the scope 3, especially the category 1 called purchased goods and services. Most organizations in New Zealand and Australia measure using what is called the spend-based method. Basically, you spend X dollars on something, so you multiply that by an average emission factor per dollar to estimate the carbon footprint. I would discourage anyone from using this method for the digital. It doesn't really work. For the digital. It can be misleading and often overestimates your footprint. A better alternative is to assess the materiality of the impact, for example, by using ISO standards to run a life cycle assessment. And the good news is that it's much more simple now than it used to be. Once you measure accurately, you can identify real hotspots, whether it's your cloud provider in Sydney, your printing services, a custom-built software, or anything else. And then once you have found hotspots, what can we do? The good news is that there are many solutions, and some are surprisingly easy to implement. On the hardware side, the number one solution is extending the lifetime of our equipment. For an organization, that often means renegotiating leasing contracts. That's exactly what our first customer in New Zealand, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, decided to do. They extended their computer replacement cycle from 3 to 4 years, which saved them a quarter of the embodied emission and reduced e-waste by 16%. What's also interesting is that data from Europe shows digital sustainability initiatives can not only reduce your overall environmental footprint, but also save up to 15% of your IT budget. A perfect win-win situation, isn't it? That's exactly what the council experienced. This single change saved them $120,000 in yearly operating expenses. So out of the actions my company, Resilio, recommends, a good dozen are like this one, easy to implement and won't cause any major disruption or resistance. Things like automatically powering off systems outside of working hours, or simply choosing to buy a little smaller smaller screens. So you might be wondering, do I really need to wait for my organization to measure its footprint and then impose changes from the top down? Actually, many of these actions come down to simple behavioral changes anyone can take. Here is a small cheat sheet that anyone can use to make a positive impact at the office. Nick asked me if we could share this document with you, and I would be very happy to. However, a new version is about to be released, including best practices for AI. So how about I share it with you once the new version is ready? Also, on the awareness side, you may have noticed a few cards illustrating this slideshow. Like this one, you can see here on the top right corner about illegal exports. These cards come from a 3-hour workshop called a Digital Collage. It's an internationally acclaimed serious game that has been played by 150,000 people around the world and a few dozens in New Zealand. So don't hesitate to reach out if you want to approach this topic in your organization in a fun and engaging way. So to wrap up, especially if you are looking for good arguments to start a conversation in your organization, why should we tackle the digital sustainability challenge? Well, first and foremost, of course, for people and the planet, we must use digital technologies wisely for the next generation. Regulation is coming, and we won't be able to avoid it. Better to be prepared. If you are already reporting your carbon footprint, there is a real opportunity to explore the materiality of digital impact. No business is immune to supply chain risk regarding the digital. We haven't touched on it, but by embracing something called eco-design, you reduce fragility of information system and build greater resilience. Eco-design also improves performance and user satisfaction. And last but not least, digital sustainability pays off, often from day one. And at any stage, my company is here to support you on the journey. Just give us a call. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jean-Philippe. Yeah, is equal parts kind of shocking and confronting as it is kind of motivating and empowering, I think, as well. So just quickly encouraging anyone who's got a question to drop it into the Q&A box, and why you're thinking of those or typing those up. I just want a couple of questions from me, Jean-Philippe, but also a couple of comments. So I just wanted to go back to, you talked about the 2-ton carbon budget, and am I right that that is the budget that every individual on the planet can emit? They can emit 2 tons of carbon today, and we will stay under the 1.5 degrees. That's where that 2-ton comes from.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was a number that came out back 5 years ago. Now it's more around 1.4 tons, which is actually very, very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, especially in our sort of privileged lives, right? Where we, like I'm standing here next to an oil heater, feeling a bit guilty about the energy I'll be using. And so that 2 tons, virtually all of us here will be well over that budget, won't we?
Yeah, we are around in the Western world, we are between 10 to 16 tons. I would say in New Zealand we are more around 10, per person.
Thank you for clarifying that. The other thing I just wanted to make a comment on is that currently there's going through Parliament here in New Zealand a right to repair amendment bill. And so these are happening all around the world. It's very much a grassroots kind of thing. And it is about making it easier for consumers to repair their products. And one of the most important of those products is digital products, phones, computers, and so on and so forth. So we have been quite involved with that and quite outspoken. We believe for us as a sustainability consultancy that's all about circular economy, for us to have any credibility, we should be involved with that. So we've been quite, working with collaborating with others in our industry to develop a letter that we sent out that is all done. We've submitted on it, and our government's now deciding on what they're going to do. But that is something that those on this call could do, as well as reach out to your local MPs or the government and say that you would like to see a right to repair bill in New Zealand. So just those kind of comments. One final thing, I just really have to say this. I'm really proud to say to you, Jean-Philippe, that at GoWell we have a refurbished only policy. So all our computer equipment is secondhand. It has been refurbished because, we obviously knew a bit about some of the stuff that you've shared today. And so that's something everyone else can think of. I don't think you need the most up-to-date iPhone or laptops or whatever. So that's what we do at GoWell. Cool. So to follow on your two actually comments, Nick. There is an interesting regulation coming up in my former country, France, where now manufacturers, smartphone manufacturers and laptop manufacturers are now able to support 5 years of security patches for smartphones and 7 years for laptops, because that's one of the driver that makes people replace their equipment, is just the inability to for them to just upgrade their equipment. Right. Thank you. So we've just got a question here from Guy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And they ask, thanks for the presentation. Can you please expand a little more on how to, in practice, evaluate the materiality?
Yes, definitely. There are a couple of I would say standards to assess the materiality of anything, including the digital. For example, ISO 14040 and 44, and also we have something in Europe called the product environmental footprint, which goes even beyond. It's actually pretty challenging, and it has been very challenging in the past in the digital space to assess the footprint of any equipment, any piece of equipment, because there are just so many of them. Many organizations, when they want to assess the materiality of, let's say, a smartphone, they would have to go to the manufacturing fact sheet and try to dig out information from it. and also try to understand what was the methodology. Does it include the battery or not? I mean, they are all different. It's difficult to compare. So what my organization in Switzerland is doing is pretty unique. They use this thing called parametric LCA. So they try to just decompose a piece of electronics in multiple parts. So a smartphone, for example, has a screen. There's a CPU, maybe, and so many, and they're all standard components, right? So if you take a screen, for example, whatever is the manufacturer, whatever is the model, the footprint of a screen will be coming from its width and the technology. Is it OLED or LCD? Just these two parameters are enough to actually calculate the actual footprint of a piece of equipment, and makes actually the process scalable, if that makes sense.
Thank you. It does.
I hope I answered the question.
It's I guess I just would comment at this point too that we are scratching the surface, as you will all can appreciate, I'm sure, who've attended webinars and done them yourselves. JP and I sort of just work through how to cut things down, and there's so much more to go into, and Jean-Philippe's full of so much knowledge around the space, and so we are really just scratching the surface to hopefully get people kind of thinking about this, I guess, and to that point, really our hope for today's webinar was that we would give you some more awareness and knowledge about the impacts of your digital decisions, and help you make sort of more informed decisions moving forward, and hope that those kind of tie into your wider sustainability goals and journey ahead, I guess. I just had a couple of other questions. I'll take this opportunity because I've got the mic. Do you know at all, Jean-Philippe, around that one that you showed of the sweating buildings, right? Of the water vapor coming out of the buildings. Do we know if that's changing the local water cycles? Like, is it on a scale, like maybe not then, but like if we're doing one of a data center that could power 5 million houses, and that's going to have to take so much water, and that's evaporating back up into the atmosphere, it makes sense to me that would be changing the local water cycle. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, I can't tell you much more about that, but what we know is that obviously the water cycle is it's not local. So what I mean by that is that rain won't fall down at the same place the water evaporates from. So that's the actual the main issue. I mean, the water doesn't disappear. It will eventually rain somewhere, but it's not going to be the same place.
I just seen a comment come in that I want to share from Sue, if others haven't read it already in the comments. But so Sue works at RTL, and she talked about how they've developed a small way. They started a small library at RTL to reduce the screen time at home, thinking that it's sort of a lot of screen time is related to boredom. So yeah, it's this one small thing. I mean, obviously you need your colleagues to pick those books up, or maybe you could have puzzles and stuff as well to pick them up and go and do them. But yeah, it's just thinking about what can workplaces do to help entertain people without digital screens. I think it's a really interesting thought and a really fascinating thing that you've done, Sue. So thanks for sharing that. Well, this is pretty much us on time. Now we've got 1 minute left, so I just would like to say thank you so much, Jean-Philippe. Merci beaucoup. Really, really appreciate you doing this and being here and sharing your knowledge. Like I say, it was just scratching the surface. I know there's much more that you'd like to talk. Jean-Philippe and I first met at a cafe in Hawke's Bay earlier this year, and we had the chat went well over a scheduled time because there's just so much to talk about. But so thank you so much and for sharing your knowledge, and look forward to keeping in contact with you and coming to you with our various digital questions. We'll share, like we say, the slides and contact details, but please feel free to reach out to Jean-Philippe directly. also to Charlotte, my colleague, who's in the background, who's pulled this all together, done all the slides, been contacting you all. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for all the work you do in the background to pull this all together. It's hugely appreciated. That's pretty much it. Thanks everyone for attending today. And yeah, if you've got any questions or comments, please do get in touch with us at Go Well or Jean-Philippe at Resilio. Ka kite.
Thank you very much.